It's the end of February. It's not very cold, but it's been pissing down with rain relentlessly for hours, and it's one of those days, I know it's a ludicrous thing to say, but it's one of those days when I think that maybe it'd have been a good idea to become a chartered accountant. But, you know, I don't think like that very often. This house is part of a little development, or a little redevelopment, because I'm fairly sure these houses were built at the very beginning of the 1960s, and we are on what used to be MOD land, a sort of sprawling, temporary rather, military encampment here, but these buildings are obviously rather permanent, but surplus to requirements, I guess, so they seem to have been bought by a developer all as a job lot and souped up mostly quite well. What we can see though, we have two chimneys above there. That's going to be significant later. Well, they're brick chimneys with what look like new lead flashing, so there's a hint of refurbishment about them. We've got a fairly simple roof. A nice new limitation on the inspection is the presence of solar panels, so we can't see a great deal of the front roof slope, but covered in pan-tile style interlocking concrete tiles. The roof ridge looks nice and straight. It also looks like it's been rebedded. Oh, in fact, it looks like, well, I know, let's stop kidding each other, it's been re-roofed. We've got new plastic gutters. What they were doing a little while ago, even when it wasn't raining very much, is leaking profusely from there. So I don't suppose they're blocked. I think there's something wrong, not properly jointed or something. Under the gutter, where we would expect to find old asbestos cement soffits, we've now got plastic. So we've got a plastic soffit, fascias, barge boards, that's all new plastic, and there's a nice long vent incorporated under there, so that should be providing much of the roof space ventilation. I mean, it's still leaking, isn't it? I don't know whether you'd call that profuse, but it's leaking. In a 1960s house, you would expect to have walls that are of cavity construction, obviously, and you would anticipate that they're going to be 280mm deep, or maybe only 260mm deep. The walls here are about 355mm deep at the window reveals. And what is almost obvious is that this house has external insulation. So there's an overhang here. There's a sort of bit of a plastic finish under there, but that's about 50mm. So I think we've got 50mm of external insulation outside the house. While we're here, we can see that there's a plastic damp-proof course. No longer the building regulations 150mm above the ground. It's been halved, that has. But are we going to make a great big fuss about that? Probably not. I mean, there's a bit of an increase there, but yeah, not ideal, but that's evidently the way it is. And the wall sounds like this, which is another clue. It's got external insulation. Walls don't normally sound like that. And we've got a fiberglass hood over the front door, so none of that is of timber or masonry construction. It's all plastic once again. Unfortunately I'm not tall enough, but give it a tap and it sounds like plastic. The sun is trying to come out. One of the things that seems to be cropping up now as a potential issue with external insulation is that if it's not completely comprehensive, you end up with cold bridging, i.e. where there is no insulation, you end up with damp patches internally. So this could be a classic example. I mean, there isn't any damp internally, I should add, but we've got a damp, what's this called? It's called a gas meter here. Meter box, I'm getting dripped on. So if we open that up, whoops. It's not a gas meter, there's no gas here. This is an electricity meter. There's a little clue there. But we don't have, a bit reluctant to touch anything metal in there, might get a nasty surprise. Yeah, there's no insulation here, so you can see where the wall was originally painted. What am I trying to say? Where there's no insulation, you're going to have a colder wall which is likely to attract condensation internally, and that is the problem with external insulation. So ideally you should take absolutely everything off the walls, all the services, all the rainwater pipes, the whole bloody lot, and put your insulation up and then put those things back on the wall. But this seems not to happen, so that could be a problem in future. I suppose equally this relatively slender door reveal might be another area where you might have a condensation problem, possibly. Here's the back of the house, and rather sad pigeon over there. Oh dear, it's not so good. And a sign saying keep off the grass. Wonder why. There it is, 2 chimneys, interlocking concrete tile roof, black plastic gutters and downpipes, plastic joinery around the edges of the roof, walls with external insulation, a brick foot, as always was the case, with a felt damp-proof course of some type. Oh, there you go. And evidently what is now a painted reconstituted stone surround about the door. I mean, I suppose what you need to worry about this stuff though is that it might have steel reinforcement in it, and as that rust it starts breaking up, so that could be an issue. And bearing in mind, standing in a pond, bearing in mind it's very wet today. The house is 1960s. I wouldn't be surprised if there is steel reinforcement, if it starts to become a problem soon. Brown staining there, so the lower part of that wall is a clue that the gutters have been leaking, splashing on the ground, sending water back up. And there's the gable end of the house, and this sort of stuff will become very common over the next few years, I expect. It is evidently an air source heat pump. Nivy, does that say? Never heard of that one. Perhaps I should do a bit of homework when I get back to base. Well, I suppose one problem with surveying a house which has been refurbished this recently is that things need a little bit of time to go wrong, don't they? And there's the other gable wall, in case you're interested, with some outbuildings, with a new asbestos cement, oh dear, I didn't mean to say that, a new corrugated cementitious roof covering. It's new, so I think you can rely on it not having any asbestos in it. You can see why I think it might though. Looks like asbestos cement, but it can't be. This is the front of the site. I mean, it's been raining profusely for a few hours, and one would imagine there's a drain under there which is supposed to be taking surface water away, but it's obviously full, and it's rather more coming up than going down, but this puddle doesn't seem to have got any bigger. But a little bit of a surface drainage problem might be worth mentioning. Well, RIS reports have a section on location, environment, etc. And what we have here is a relatively rural environment. You can see hills in the distance, and where's it gone? Church spire there. But also you can see lots of construction vehicles, so I anticipate that the view at the back of this house is going to change enormously. Over the next few years it's going to disappear under a swathe of new housing. Here's a window reveal, so if you hadn't worked out that there's something unusual about this house before, you would have twigged probably this wall is much too big to be a conventional 1960s cavity wall. It is 355mm deep and not 280, which is probably what you'd anticipate. I've rather let myself down by leaving my good quality torch in a house in Pewsey, but just about see what's going on here. It's the original roof frame, isn't it? So it's a nicely built 1960s roof. Rafters meeting the roof ridge as they should. Purlins tying the rafters together and supporting them. And you've got struts down to these hangers. Hangers, I believe, pull the roof down to stop it being sucked off, if I might use that expression, by exceptionally strong winds. And I think also they pull the ceilings up. So that's all as it should be. And we've got this modern air permeable underlay. And right above my head, a bit of technology, something to do with the solar installation on the roof. So that's all fairly good. Heaps of insulation, badly distributed. I mean, there's probably places in there where there's virtually no insulation, and a redundant old, focus on that will you mate, redundant galvanised steel tank. Anyway, over there is a chimney or a chimney breast extending through the roof, and over here there's another one, but this one doesn't actually go very far, so we'll have a look at that in a minute. Anyway, nice roof, I think. So this is first floor. I mean, it's all nice, new and white. New ceilings, actually, we know that. But this is, that is the chimney breast that is by the loft hatch. So you can tell to an extent. I mean, everything in here is masonry, to be honest, but that clunk of masonry is a chimney breast which needs supporting down below. And down below we've got this nice big open plan kitchen, and this space here above that kitchen unit is where our chimney breast should be. So we've got something boxed in across the ceiling. Boxing obviously makes it impossible to see what it is, and then we've got something boxed in down there, and down here we've got a little trapdoor with a stop tap in it, but can you see? Of course you can. Adjacent to the stop tap we've got a metal post, so that we know that there has been some structural steelwork included. So that metal post is there, and one would imagine there'll be a metal beam going that way, but we don't really know what it's sitting on. I mean, there's plenty of masonry in here for it to sit on, so more structural steelwork perhaps. That'll be boxing for the bathroom, but maybe there's space in there, you know, soil pipes I'm getting at. Maybe there's space in there for a steel post as well. We just don't know, but it all looks straight, clean, tidy, uncracked, so no real problems anticipated. And there's the other chimney breast, unused. There's a vent in it, but if anyone wants to go and put a groovy solid fuel stove in, they can. Sunshine at last. Lastly, we should remember, I suppose, we are in an old house, relatively old house. So what I like to say is building materials will expand and contract, and this results in cracking, which typically occurs above and below windows, over doors, and where walls meet partitions, especially if they're different materials. Anyway, so it's always worth looking. I mean, here we've got a window. I can't see any cracking above the window, but if you come down here, there is the faintest bit of cracking going down there, following the shape of the aggregate blockwork. And this window over here, the same thing, a bit more obvious. There you've got a crack going down there, all the way to the ground. Not obviously replicated. Well, I think it is, isn't it? I mean, it's so fine I can't really see it, but there is. So we've got a top to bottom crack with the window taking up the middle section. Well, that's thermal. It's building materials expanding and contracting. It'll disappear under the next coat of paint, and it probably disappeared under the last coat of paint, but it'll be back.